Welcome to the Cyber Rants Podcast, where we're all about sharing the forbidden secrets and slightly embellished truths about corporate cybersecurity programs. We're ranting, we're raving, and we're telling you the stuff that nobody talks about on their fancy website and trade show giveaways, all to protect you from cyber criminals. And now, here's your hosts, Mike Rotondo, Zach Fuller, and Lauro Chavez.
Hello, and welcome to the Cyber Rants Podcast. Once again, this is your co-host, Zach Fuller, joined by Lauro Chavez and Mike Rotondo. And today we are talking about an important aspect of your cyber risk management program, which of course is the vendor vetting process. This is something that highly mature organizations will have dialed in and really looking good. But for most organizations out there, it is a struggle. So we'll be talking about vendor vetting and what it's all about, what's in it, how to get it in place, all the good stuff, but only after Mike and Lauro talk about Microsoft and WordPress. I'm sorry, but I hate to ruin it, but I have a feeling there are going to be some articles about those two in today's discussion. I don't want to steal your thunder.
Spoiler
so Mike,
alert.
It's only like 75%.
So there's something else in it? Okay, well, good. Yeah. Why don't you give us the good news, Mike?
Let's start out with cyber attacks use Office 365 to target the supply chain, which kind of dovetails nicely into our topic for today. Supply chain attacks starting in Office 365 can take on many different forms. For instance, spear phishers can use compromised O365 accounts to scout out target employees' outgoing emails. They can use what they learn to go after vendors and suppliers with business email compromised fraud attacks. Supply chain cyber attacks involving Office 365 are effective in that they enable threat actors to bypass some authentication controls. So the remediation for that is focus on putting the best defenses practices forward. So also enable MFA. Microsoft notifies about an ongoing open redirects phishing campaign. Microsoft announced on their website on August 26th about an ongoing open redirects phishing campaign that uses several techniques to trick users into clicking on compromised links. This is managed via email messages that contain open redirector links, which eventually lead victims to a malicious page where their credentials are stolen. Microsoft also warned about this in April, kind of blew it off, but they found out that there was an additional 350 unique phishing domains that show this effort, including financial. So be real careful what links you click on. A non-Microsoft news, T-Mobile hacker used brute force attack to steal customers' data. This is a mess. Apparently, up to 100 million customers from T-Mobile got their PII stolen. T-Mobile says 40 million. Either way, it's a lot. The hacker basically breached an unprotected router and then looked around and see weak spots in the environment or in the network, and then and completed the exploit. But the good news is the CEO of T-Mobile did apologize. So there's that. Fake DMCA complaints, DDoS threats lead to Baza Loader malware. Just wanted to say Baza Loader. Cyber criminals behind the Baza Loader malware came up with a new lure to trick website owners into opening malicious files. It's actually quite brilliant. Fake notifications about their site being engaged in DDoS attacks. The message contains a legal threat and a file stored in a Google Drive folder that allegedly provides evidence of the source of attacks. So be careful. Microsoft Azure customers warn of critical bug found in Cosmos DB. So this is another Microsoft one. This month, cybersecurity researchers at the cloud security company Wiz have noticed that they could have obtained access to the primary read-write key for most users of the Cosmos DB database system, which allowed them to steal, modify, or get rid of millions of databases. Following the Wiz warning on 12 August, Microsoft has immediately disabled the vulnerable feature and informed more than 30% of their potentially impacted individuals and urged them to change their keys. Microsoft says the vulnerability has been immediately fixed, but no data was stolen. There are some serious doubts about the fact that no data was stolen since it had been exposed for quite some time. And lastly, ransomware attacks on U.S. schools and colleges cost $6.62 billion in 2020. It's a lot of money. 77 individual ransomware attacks affected over 1,740 schools and colleges, impacting almost 1.36 million students. So be careful if you own a school or if you're managing a school and click on your links. Basically, hackers received at least about $2 million in ransom payments per attack. So keep that in mind. With that, Lauro, let's talk about WordPress.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Let's just ruin the fun for the day. But seriously, if you're hanging out with that crazy open source feller WordPress, you got to be careful this week again. There's the Get Paid plugin. There's HTML injection there. with that one. And then of course, if you're using the profile press, there's privilege escalation. So if you're running that plugin, someone's going to be able to get on your actual WordPress admin account probably and do bad stuff. So check the plugins aren't on the list if you're using any of these things. And yeah, risky business. Zach, what are we talking about today?
Thought you'd never ask. I figured there'd be another 10, 15 minutes of WordPress and Microsoft. But if that's over.
I mean, it's, I don't know. Everybody should probably get the trend at this point. 6 podcasts in a row. It's WordPress, Microsoft, WordPress, Microsoft.
Yeah, we're not doing that on purpose. That is not intentional. It just is.
It is.
Well, interesting news about the schools too. I mean, we've done work for school systems there. That's a huge undertaking because school systems have very, very vast networks. When especially public schools, lots of facilities, lots of networks, lots of devices, and a lot of them are issuing like Chromebooks and stuff to their students. So you got tens of thousands of devices out there and a lot to protect. And kids can be malicious on their devices. I know I was at that age. So watch out, school districts. But hey, today we are talking about the vendor vetting process. We want to talk about why it's critical, how to build a vendor vetting process, and really put it into action, what you need and all of that. But before we do, we're going to take a very quick break, quick commercial here, and we will be right back.
Want even more Cyber Rants? Be sure to subscribe to the Cyber Rants podcast. Get your copy of our best-selling book, Cyber Rants, on Amazon today. This podcast is brought to you by Silent Sector, the firm dedicated to building world-class cybersecurity programs for mid-market and emerging companies across the U.S. Silent Sector also provides industry-leading penetration tests and cyber risk assessments. Visit silentsector.com and contact us today.
And we're back. Vendor vetting, big topic and a big struggle for a lot of organizations. There's a lot of complexities with it. There are a lot of considerations and a lot of disjointed thoughts within an organization, right? Especially security teams, IT teams, they know they want their users on secure environments using secure tools, but a lot of times, say, maybe if I were to call out sales or marketing, a lot of times they just want the tool in the door. They just want that platform being used and they're not worried about the technicalities of it. So a lot of disconnect. So let's dive into that today, Mike and Laura. What do you say? Does that sound good?
Sounds like a plan.
Let's do it.
Well, why do you need to have a vendor vetting process? What happens if you don't?
Well, if you're dealing with PII, PHI, EPHI, and whatever acronym else you want to come up with, if you haven't vetted a vendor properly, you run a pretty heavy risk of breach. And that's really one of my main concerns. Plus, you put a tool in place that you're running your business out of and they have no DR or business continuity or incident response plans, you could be in a lot of trouble if they get hacked, they break down, they blow out a server, they lose connectivity or whatever else happens.
Target, maybe? Remind everybody of the Target breach.
Oh, yeah.
That's where I think this really vendor vetting really started getting a lot of visibility was when Target got breached through their air conditioning vendors systems. So prime example. Yeah.
So I guess it probably, the place to start is just understanding what vendors that you have dependencies for operations, right? I mean, to give everybody a kind of a starting point. And, it's super important. Like you said, Zach, the supply chain sometimes is overlooked just because, organizations need they need a component for their services, internal or external, or, to meet some form of compliance, and they will kind of toss a service in, and that one step is usually always missed. But I think you're right. I think it's becoming a more commonplace today. I think we're seeing it more often. I think we've even seen some pretty small shops, right? 1 and 2 person shops that are creating a very, very cool product that a lot of the bigger organizations want to use. And they're hitting them with the vendor vetting questionnaire, you know what I mean? And so I think that we'll all just kind of learn from that sort of process together, because I don't think that's something that some of those smaller organizations would expect to see, and now they're starting to see it more frequently.
It's interesting because we speak on both sides of this topic quite a bit because we're on both sides of it, right? We build vendor vetting processes. We help clients vet their vendors, but we also help clients get through the vendor vetting process themselves. So see a lot of different questionnaires. So, first, of course, basically an inventory of your vendors, right? Now, what would be your next approach? Would you dive right in and have them all do a questionnaire? What would be your next step in the process?
Well, the questionnaires, certainly I think the most commonplace, but what I'm just going to say it, I'll rant today. My heart bleed with the questionnaires is that a lot of organizations are, their security teams know, no, you're doing a great job. No offense here. You're building a questionnaire based off of NIST or CIS or whatever else, and you've got, somewhere between 50 and 180 plus, sometimes even more, 300 plus questions I've seen in these questionnaires, and you're sending these to vendors. And here's the thing: is that what's happening is that you're with the sales process kind of stalled. Now you're causing the internal teams to have to take the time to research all these questions and understand that what happens is that most of them aren't applicable. And so I think a better process for the future would be to tailor your risk assessments to the type of service that you're assessing, right? What vendor is it? What's the vendor doing? Do they have systems or setting inside of your organization, and they're going to remote in or RDP that's questionable? So if it's something sketchy, absolutely, maybe they need to have a 350 question vendor vetting process, right? Questionnaire. But if maybe they're offering an API hook or just some base code for you to install, maybe 10 or 15 questions is suitable for you to understand what's the security around the organization. Maybe they don't need that. So I think Zach, the next step's a questionnaire, but I wanted to kind of blanket that with, don't just grab 400 questions and shoot it at somebody and say, here, tell me about yourself. You're going to get probably a lot of not answers, right? Not as quick as you'd like to see. And I think it's not appropriate for a lot of the types of businesses. So it has to be custom tailored, I think. And so you can take a subset of that major questionnaire and fan it out.
It's a good point. There's one thing that I think we need to put a step in front of that, though, is that decide which vendors actually need to have that questionnaire answered. Because I've gotten questions from some of our clients. It's like, well, does the cleaning crew that has access to the office after hours need to be vetted from this perspective? Well, no, it doesn't, right? Even though they do have technically access to your servers because they're cleaning the area, they should be bonded, and that's a different kind of vendor vetting rather than a cybersecurity questionnaire. So you need to decide which vendors need to get this, and then see how deep you are in with them. What happened? You need to figure out the contingencies. Why you design a questionnaire that beats your business. You also think about the contingencies of what happens when you do come across that vendor that doesn't have the security in place, that doesn't have any controls in place. Case in point, the startup that you have dealt with, that you are, some sales team has spun up and they're starting to use, and then all of a sudden you find out they're putting, PII data in there without them having any vetting. So you do a security questionnaire and you find out that they have no controls in place. Everybody's working from home. Half the team's in India, and you have no control over the data. So, what happens then? So you have to think about that contingency as well. On the other side, when you're receiving these, it's okay to push back, because there's like big companies asking a small company to do a small piece of this. It's okay to say, why do I need this? And then you have to look at the fact of what will it cost on opportunity and cash to implement what they're requesting versus what the contract is worth. Case in point, there's some clients out there that deal with big, healthcare industries, and they're requesting just these giant, basically NIST 853 requirement lists for something they're doing a very minor piece of that has no EPHI, has no PII, has no, critical data in it, but they're asking all this information and requiring you to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on services and software and solutions when it's a $50,000 a year contract. So those are the questions you need to ask as well.
Yeah, so good point, Mike. You can kind of put these things in, like, I guess, 3 buckets, right? If you're assessing a company, if you're looking at your vendors, you've got vendors that you're going to need to send a questionnaire to, right? A tailored questionnaire. You're going to have some vendors you may be dependent on that you can go and get their SOC 2 report or whatever off of their website, right? You can request a temporary link to view it once a year. And then you're going to have the third site, like we were talking about, Mike, where they've got, on-prem access, like a cleaning crew or some form of other type of crew where there's going to be a different type of vetting that's going to, maybe revolve around more insurance-based type liability stuff, for that type of engagement. And so you can kind of cross those into, those few buckets. And then like you said, Mike, from being assessed, if you're receiving these questionnaires, it is okay to push back. I think it's okay, because a lot of these questionnaires are going to come down from organizations who are, let's just face it. I guess because we do this a lot, I'm biased. There's like 99% of organizations aren't custom tailored any of these questionnaires. They're bombing you with a million questions, and there's more than half that aren't going to be applicable to the type of service you're providing.
Right.
They're going to be requiring things that you're going to need to do. They're going to cost money and time and people and process, right? And speaking of the vendor vetting process, I guess that's the output of this, right? Is that questionnaire is going to come back to you, right? And so that the individuals that are corporate teams, they know this, but for the other organizations that aren't doing these processes yet, that comes to like a risk ranking matrix, right? That like those answers inside that questionnaire hold a weight of some form of formula that should go back to a risk report that says, it's going to cost this much risk to do business with this client based on these factors, right? And so that should allow the business to make a determination on whether, and that's really what's happening in the larger organizations, right? That we see that they're making that decision on the little, the questionnaires you're answering those questions. That's what's coming back. They're doing that formula, and they're saying it's going to cost us this much risk to do business with this organization. So the organization may say, okay, do we have another service that's in the same family as what we're trying to get out of this organization, that has a better risk profile, that maybe has less risk for us? And so they may pay more money to do business with another organization because they have a similar product and better security controls, so that there's less risk to the organization trying to use that.
What are your so putting yourself on the side of the person doing the vetting? So you're looking at various vendors, various options, getting these questionnaires back. First of all, what are some of the critical elements and some of the potential deal breakers that you'd see come up? In other words, what point does an organization decide that, hey, this is no longer a viable option for us? I know that's a broad question because it's very different for every type of organization, but in your mind, your opinion, at what point would you say, no, we need to go on and find a different option?
I think deal breakers for seeing the questionnaires, at least for me, are seeing responses that I don't know.
Yeah.
Some things that are basically like, this doesn't apply without an explanation. So, that's okay that things don't apply. And here's what I tell everybody is that, you don't want to leave an answer blank. And if there's room for an explanation, you want to explain why or why not the control is applicable to you. Okay. I know that everybody just wants to go down and make this a quick thing. Unfortunately, it's not that way. It's meant for you to sit and breathe a few times and have several cocktails of your choosing and go through this thing, right, line by line, and answer appropriately like you would in a test, right? So I give it like 100-word essay, right? Each response deserves at least somewhere between 20 and 100 words. And that's not hard to do, to explain why or why not the controls in or out of place. I think those are deal breakers right off the bat, because now there's two choices. I can either go with another questionnaire that has better answers today, or I can go back to you and say, please correct these, please respond here, right? So now I'm already like having to, kind of hold your hand in the process, and that may make the sales, stickier, and it may make other, if it's a hasty project as an example, they may go with somebody who's already got the questions answered, ready to go, right? The risk profile is completed on our side, right? We can hand it over and we can say, well, we're waiting on client B, but we got client A, here you go. And they can be out there like, look, we don't have time to waste. Let's just do client A, right? So make sure you're not going to bottleneck that process and, possibly, cost yourself an option. And then the administrative controls for everybody, I think, is the other one. For me.
What I find is that if they can't produce evidence that they've done that. Okay, you've gotten a pen test from a third party. Great. Do you have a letter of attestation? No. Then that's generally a deal breaker, because if they're not telling the truth about something that should be easy evidence to produce, then you can't really trust anything else in there. Along with, Laurel, you made some very good points, and I agree with those as well. But I mean, that's just the additional one that I see, because I've seen that before recently, and it's like, oh well, we did it internally, not we misspoke, and it's like, no, you patently represented yourself falsely. So that's one of the deal breakers that I see. Is if you go to that point, then I don't want to do business with you.
Yeah, not having any I think today with the way, I think the other deal breaker I'll talk about, right? And it's not necessarily a deal breaker more than I guess it's both. It can be a deal breaker, and it is absolutely a challenge, is that everybody's remote workforce today. You need some form of endpoint protection to protect those hosts. You have to. These questionnaires, again, they're going to be geared from a NIST perspective, and they're going to start talking about the protection in place for those endpoints and how you're protecting the assets communication over that untrusted network, which is the home network, right? Just like it would be in an airport or anything else. So if you're not enforcing VPN, and you're not, just saying that you're, we use Google Corporate, or, we use Office 365, is it good enough if the endpoint machine that your employee is using is their home machine that's shared amongst, the individual that's in high school, as well as the child that's probably watching Dave and Ava, so there's like there could be a lot of things going on there, right? And, I think that's another deal breaker that I see coming out today, is that there's no endpoint protection coupled with complete administrative control over the endpoint that the employee is using.
Yeah.
What about, there's kind of an elephant in the room in the vendor vetting world, which is this, SOC 2 audit, for example, or ISO 27001 audit, or HITRUST audit. What we see is that a lot of people think that, well, I have this audit, so I don't have to go through this process. Obviously, that's not the case. What are your thoughts on the weight of various third-party audits versus the questionnaire, and do you need both?
So from a SOC 2 perspective, if the company that does the audit is reputable, that's a big asterisk, and reputable in italics, then it answers most of the questions, but you still want the questionnaire filled out, because there's additional pieces in there and you want an attestation from there. What concerns me is, as Silent Sector and Keystone Audit dig further and further into the SOC 2 stuff, there's a lot of disreputable SOC 2 audits out there that are, give us 10 grand, we'll make sure you pass the audit, and we'll generate the evidence for you. Kind of fly-by-night things. Even though they're regulated by the AICPA, there's overseas things that companies that are still generating this because they don't have AICPA oversight. So you need to verify who this company is that's actually doing the audit, and that it's recent. And I think, those are valuable attestations. However, you have to verify the source, and unfortunately, you have to verify the source now, because it's getting to the point where it's such commoditized. It's like a lot of pen tests turn out to be just scams, right? And there's a lot of commoditization of these tools out there, or tests out there that are diluting the value in the environment.
Yeah, probably purposefully too, Mike. But yeah, to answer your question, Zach, a good point, and you have to answer the questions, right? I mean, you can't just throw here's our attestation letter for this, or here's our SOC 2 report. We don't have to fill the questionnaire out. The questionnaire is part of the process, right? If you're receiving that, that means it's part of the process for the sales hitch. So handing the report isn't going to be good enough, right? The team's going to say, well, I need to make my risk report. I need the answers filled out on the questionnaire, right, in order for me to conduct that. So you're going to, you can kind of templatize your answers. Now, there's some services out there that'll, use some form of like an AI-based bot that'll look for familiar word matches, and they'll look at relationships and things like that. You can do that yourself, right? And I mean, I think you probably should. I would never trust anybody but somebody in the company to answer these questionnaires, because, like Mike said, they can generate a bunch of crap. You know what I mean? And so, Bojack's, backwoods in the holler SOC 2 stuff is absolutely a real deal. Everybody trying to jump on this, bandwagon. So you just gotta look out for that kind of stuff. Yeehaw! But answer the questionnaire. Try to you're going to see a redundancy in some of the questions. Try to have some form of standardized answers. Will help your process go a little faster. Yeah, Zach. I mean, yeah, fill it out and then obviously attach your report.
Yeah, and the thing that we see though too is that a lot of organizations, they will, in the mid-market, right, will have an idea. They have a vendor that's going to bring them a new capability and technology based, right? And they want to understand how that vendor fits within their environment. I think there's also a lack of clarity there. The vendor seems to have a great offering, but they need connectivity, and they don't have enough visibility on their diagram. They don't have, things like architecture diagrams and data flow diagrams. So they don't ultimately understand what's where. Do you have any advice or guidance you'd give to organizations in that position, what they should do in order to gain that clarity to help further understand if the vendor is viable beyond just the questions in the questionnaire?
I think I speak for both Mike and myself when I see every engineer Jedi level out there today that claims to be Jedi level should be diagramming their equipment, period.
Yep.
Period. There should be detailed troubleshooting level diagrams. You should have that. If you don't have that today, that's okay. You probably haven't reached that level yet, but you should be looking at that. I think those are absolutely necessary, for sure.
Well, and then you just, set up a meeting, or you engage a third party like SoundSpector to have a 4-hour review of the client, and, have meetings with the vendor and validate it if you're not sure how to make those decisions on your own.
Yeah, no, good point. And I was going to say that I think some of the most value I've seen is some of the big clients when they come around, because you're not going to receive this questionnaire once and you're done, right? This is going to be a repetitious activity for their governance framework. They have to check their vendors, right? This is vendor management. Right. So once you start vendor management, it's a forever machine, right? So you have to manage your vendors. You check up on them. We checked on SoundSpector on August 1st. Next year on August 1st, you should be trying to ask us for a questionnaire or send us an email that says, has anything changed? Yeah. And so they're going to be doing the same thing to you. And some of the most valuable ones I've seen, and I haven't seen this very often, but the big, I'm not going to call their names out, but the big mature organizations that get it, they have a governance team meet with you. They do a screen sharing session. They ask you to demonstrate. Please show me in your security policy where you talk about XYZ. Please show me how you do backups. Do you have a diagram? Please, let's talk to me about it, right? So they're recording the conversation using something like Zoom or anything else, and they're taking screenshots of the documentation, and they'll say, we don't need to see the whole document. We just need to see this one paragraph. Just make sure that the language is there. And so I think that level of due diligence is where we'd all hope to be someday, to make sure that everybody does have the documentation and is, producing that sort of cyclical activities that they say to do in a document.
Yeah, it comes down to the size of your team too. I mean, you do the best you can as far as, those kind of things. Ideally, it would be nice to have a team do all that, but when you're a one-man band, you do what you can. At
least shameless SoundSpector plug.
yeah, insert. So no, we can certainly help, right? I mean, I think we do this a lot. Right. But the diagramming, you can do that on your own, and you should have those, right? Those architectural level diagrams when you're asked, because we see that a lot as part of that vetting process, right? They want to see what the architecture looks like. They want to know what a data flow looks like for a customer. So and you're thinking like, well, it's just a web browser, and yeah, that's fantastic. So on a diagram, show a little human and show a line that says HTTPS 443 TLS.1.2 or better through the public cloud to your DNS IP or however you're running it, man. But have some, even if it's as simple as that, have some diagram, because someone's going to ask for it. And so even if it's a super simple hookup, have some form of just basic logical diagram of how the functional operation. I think it'll help get through that vendor vetting process easier too, because now you can show how it works to the inquisitor and say, this is why I don't have to answer the other 343 questions you sent me, is because this is how simple it is. And they're going to go, oh.
And it shows you thought through it too, just having the diagram in place. So
Absolutely.
one,
Presentation is half the battle.
right. Let me bring up one exception to getting the reports done, and it's not that, or the questionnaires done. So there are certain companies you may have heard of, like AWS, Google, Microsoft, Azure, where you're having hosting done. You can try and send them a questionnaire, and you can send them a questionnaire. The thing is, depending on the size of your company and the size of the contract, they may or may not acknowledge your existence.
Yeah, that
And-
was that bucket. Yeah, the three
Yeah.
buckets. You got to put them in you got to go and check their stuff because they're never going to answer you.
Yeah. Now I've only had AWS and Google respond one time, and that was when I was working at a Fortune 500 company, and it was millions of dollars a year contract, and I got responses from both of them. But when we're dealing with a small to medium or emerging size to medium sized businesses, whatever our marketing term today is, generally they're like, yeah, thanks, but here's our page where you can download the stuff and take a look at it.
Speaking of AWS and Azure and the other platforms out there, by the way, everybody, if you're relying on them to say, oh yeah, we're secure because we're on AWS and we're going to use that as our answer for a security questionnaire, you're wrong. Just there's no way to sugarcoat it. It's not going to fly just because you can't just write off your security to those platforms. Anybody vetting the organization is going to know that. So if you are on the vetting side, vetting your vendors, and they do that, then you know they're not a very sophisticated organization. Not a lot of maturity there in their cyber risk management program if they're just saying, oh, we're good because we just use Office 365 and Azure.
Yeah. And if there's like, after that Azure, if there's like 500 words in the comment section that talks about what security modules that you've purchased through Azure in order to protect the services, that makes a lot of difference too. So in that case, you can kind of say it because you can articulate the exact security controls that you've purchased and have in place that the control's asking for. But yeah, Zach, if you think just by saying that just blanketly is going to cover anything, you're absolutely incorrect.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. It is important. They're great platforms out there to use, and use them by all means, but there's more to it than just saying.
Yeah. If you're not
sitting
paying
on
for it,
their
don't assume
environment.
you got it. Yeah, if it's not on the invoice sheet, you probably don't have the capability, right?
Yeah.
So don't make assumptions. No assessor will.
Yeah.
Hey, any final smart remarks or thoughts or ideas? Because we are running out of time here. We got so excited about vendor vetting that time just flew by.
Do it. You got to do vendor vetting, right? Vet your vendors, come up with some form of 3-bucket tier that they fall in, stuff that you can probably get a questionnaire out of or should get a questionnaire out of, and stuff that you're probably going to go do some research on your own, and then stuff that's going to probably be more nature of contract, liability insurance driven type activities. Get a little questionnaire, design it to meet a couple different specific types of business, go forth and conquer, create it, use your calendar to mark the anniversary dates for the times that you check on your vendors. And then just keep that list updated of those vendors, and then if you get to an opportunity to do so, create a little risk, kind of a risk ranking matrix, so you can understand where they fall in a risk ranking based on the answers that you received or didn't receive, and that sort of thing. And then any final thought, sorry, any assessor is just going to look that you email them. If you don't get the questionnaire back, that's fine. I want to see that you send an email out. You show me your calendar. Look, I check on Silent Sector every August 1st. I'm like, cool, did you send them an email? Yeah, I have an automated email that says, hey, you idiots, when are you going to send me my questionnaire? So, yeah.
And just one other point is that just like in dealing with, SOC 2, PCI, whatever kind of auditor that you deal with these questionnaires, it's okay to ask questions. You're just not, there's a big sale out there, and you gotta take care of the company, but it is okay to ask for clarification on these things. Just make sure they're intelligent questions.
What's the questionnaire, precious?
Yeah.
So,
Don't ask someone what SCCM means in a questionnaire or something like that. Something that's easily Google.
What's
send
the
a
vulnerability?
questionnaire for the questionnaire.
Yeah. But you can also push back on their requirements, and you can ask them to clarify why it's necessary. Because a lot of the time, especially if they're using a third party, to do the vendor vetting, they don't know anything about your business, what they're using it for, or for that matter, the business they're doing the vetting for.
Yeah, I hand the questionnaire to the engineers. I take
Yeah.
the questionnaire from the customer to the engineers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking to people. Yeah.
I am good at dealing with people.
If you don't know where that's
Outstanding.
that's from Office Space. And if you don't know that's Office Space, then you got problems.
If you don't know that that's from Office Space, you need to stop what you're doing immediately. Turn this podcast off and go watch Office Space like 6 times in a row.
Yes.
So, but most of you will. So, well, hope everybody enjoyed this. See, vendor vetting, just like policy documentation, can be a lot of fun, despite what everybody else tells you. So vendor vetting, good thing. Do it, make it happen. Get a vendor vetting process built for your organization and understand how the process works to make your organization a more viable candidate for large enterprise contracts. So thanks, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this podcast. Go to cyberants.com. I'm sorry, cyberantspodcast.com, and there's a comment form in there, and send us your rants and let us know what you want us to chat about on future episodes. Thanks a lot and have a great rest of your day.
Pick up your copy of the Cyber Ants book on Amazon today. And if you're looking to take your cybersecurity program to the next level, visit us online at www.silentsector.com. Join us next time for another edition of the Cyber Rants